Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to One Step Away From. This is the 10th and final episode of season 1. What a journey it's been from the start to now. Before we start, we just wanted to thank the listeners and viewers for being with us throughout this journey. It was quite a difficult journey to start with, as we was in lockdown, in a pandemic and everything else involved, but we're here. 10th episode. So me and my boys here, we're building with each episode, and hopefully we'll continue to grow with you and also progress in terms of engaging you guys in our social platforms and having that interaction. So without further ado, the topic for this episode will be around us being conditioned to fail. And what I mean by that is, from a young age, are we being conditioned to fail? Boys, the floor is yours.
Well, when I step into the whole process of this is almost like this is social enterprising and social investment and I guess social conditioning. When I hear about are we being conditioned to fail, I have to break down the words in terms of their meaning. So conditioning, according to Oxford Dictionary, is the process of training or accustoming a person or animal to behave in a certain way to accept certain circumstances. I'll say that one more time. Conditioning is the process of training or customizing a person or animal to behave in a certain way or to accept certain conditions or certain circumstances. Then the word fail means, in terms of the verbal definition 1, to be unsuccessful in achieving one's goal. So to combine these, it means that you are being trained to be unsuccessful. So when you ask the question, are we being conditioned to fail? Are we being trained to be unsuccessful in this society, which will be social conditioning? Yeah, accepting the circumstances that we are in. In fact, we are driving ourselves towards it based on what we're being taught. So when you ask, what do I think about that situation? I think that is probably one of the most evilest things you can do. Because then what happens is this: where does the blame lie? If you teach someone to train themselves to fail, you have no part in that, do you? So when they act in certain ways or do certain things which cause them to fail, the onlookers only see the person acting in a certain way, which makes them fail, which means you blame the person acting in that certain way. No one blames the trainer. Why? Because the trainer is society. Something that isn't tangible, something which is ever changing and ever moving. But what is tangible is the person acting in a way that will cause them to be unsuccessful in achieving their goal. That's so pernicious, man. That's so pernicious, because then what do? You have to respond to that person acting in that way, causing themselves to fail. You have to stereotype them. You have to put them in certain areas in society so they don't become a parasite and cause other people who surround them to fail. All the while we are missing on the causation. So I think that is one of the most evilest thing. To condition someone to fail is one of the most evilest things.
For sure. To add on to that, when I heard the question, I thought I focused more on the conditioning part personally. And I thought, okay, so if we're conditioned to fail, how are we conditioned to fail? So I focused on the how. And I thought, let me come up with a few ways that we could be conditioned to fail. So I thought through religion. I looked at religion, main religion, Christianity. We know there's a sinister history between Christianity and Black people. Christianity was used to enslave Black people, and we were trained to be slaves by using a book, religion, the Bible. So I thought, boom, that's one. You could say that. Okay, what else? History. Could our learning of history and education be conditioning us to fail? Okay, in the Western society. I know it's different wherever you are in the world. History changes because, as they say, the victors write the history, or there's some sort of quote like that. So where I grew up in the Western, growing up in the Caribbean, I learned about white history. Didn't really learn that much about Black history in the Caribbean. When I moved to the UK, I learned about white history. Yeah, the only thing I learned about Black history in the UK was slavery. Watching, I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, watching Roots, but only watching the slavery scene, watching them get caught. So me being taught in education and learning about my history, all I ever saw was me being a slave. So I guess I could be conditioned into failing that way because I saw nothing positive. Then I looked at the media, and we touched on the media before. And if you listen to that previous podcast, I think we all came to the conclusion that there is a lot of negatives and negative stereotypes and connotations to being Black that is portrayed in the media. So thinking as a person, as a child growing up, receiving all these informations, one could say that there's a large argument to support us being conditioned for failure.
Powerful. You both raised some strong points there, man. From Kay, I just want to pick up on what you said. You literally simplified the question, and I like that, and thank you for that. Because some viewers may not have understood where that question was coming from, and you made it simple and straightforward.
First and foremost, I think the answer to that question, I would say to our listeners, and once again, shout out, we're in our 10th episode. So if you're stayed with us all the way through, or if you're new to it, then big up to yourself. And like I said at the start, we're here to stay, and that's very true. If you listen back to any of our podcasts, you'll be able to see within any podcast there's been an element of conditioning. But just because the question's been asked, I had a conversation with my friend yesterday, actually, and one area that I want to talk about in terms of how we're being conditioned is, why I answer yes to that is because the schooling system, we are, in my opinion, we are being, or from the schooling angle, we are conditioned to be employees. We're conditioned to not be our own men or people, and I'm speaking about everyone here. We're conditioned
100%.
we're conditioned to be employees of other people. Basically, we're not taught those skills. If you think about all the life skills that we have to learn, and everyone that's listening has had to learn in their life, how much of those skills really came from school? Like I'd be very surprised if it was more than not, if that makes sense. So my point is, the conditioning comes from us being put into a world where, or a fake world of, this is how things are supposed to run, but we all know that that's not how reality is. We have to face so many challenges, X, Y, and Z, that goes against the grain, what we've been conditioned to do. So, long story short, the answer to your question, T, yes, I really do think we, and especially our children now, are being conditioned for failure, or conditioned to be unsuccessful. However, it's our responsibility to kind of divert that direction of where society wants us to go, and especially people of color also. And just finally, another aspect of conditioning is the thing that we have in front of our faces every day, whether it be a small screen or a big screen, but ultimately the power of media, television programming. It says enough in that TV program, like programming. What does that word mean? That's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah, man, you bang on with that. Because my aspect came from the education background as well. In a nutshell, I do agree that we are being conditioned. I think the system in which we work in or have to live through doesn't give us the tools needed for real life. So when you finish school and the world opens up, you're not prepared. Like, not from an academic point of view anyway, you're not prepared. Your parents may install in you morals and ways of living and behaviors, but we're not given the correct tools. So yeah, I do believe that we are being conditioned.
Okay, interesting. So, man, this is for me. It's dear to me, and I think for a lot of people, even some few boys in here, we've all got kids. It's dear to me because of that, because I am looking at it from a point of my kids now. Even though some of you have touched on from our life, starting from school times, going through that. For me, I was looking at it as for my kid now. Is my kid being conditioned? I know for me, I've already surrendered to it. It happened. But now I was focusing on the future and how that's going to impact them going forward as well.
So can I ask, as a father then, seeing that your child is being influenced by elements that you maybe don't agree with or haven't put in place, how does it make you feel, man?
Listen, we're going to get to that. I'm not going to answer that question because we need to get to that, and which is good. It's sort of such on a level because you touched on education. That was going to be my next question. Again, Tick, and you've run a few questions ahead, but which is good. Hold fire on that. For myself, I agree 100%. We are being conditioned to fail, but the way it's being done now, it's not the same as it was done to our fathers and our mothers and to us. It's more cunning now. It's hidden. Like Em said about the screens in front of us, whether it's big or small, social media control. But it goes further than that. So when I was looking at it, I would looked at it as well from an education point of view. And I was looking at how education has an impact on our lives in general. Like you touched on Ems about we're being conditioned to take orders and not to be leaders, but to be followers and to be workers. But then they have gone a step further now. So a few things that I researched on was one of the things that they have pushed through schools is banning red pens. So, they use red pens to mark exams or homework or whatever else. That's no longer allowed in schools. And their reason behind it is because it's too negative.
Wow.
Yep. So looking into it, I was quite fascinated because I was like, what? What do you mean it's too negative? It's a red pen. What's negative about it? We grew up with a red pen. All of us did. I didn't think anything of it. So when I was looking through the websites and trying to find out the real reason, no one could actually specify the real reasons. It was people saying they got told this, they got told that. But one of the things they touched on, which I don't have any knowledge on, and I just want to bring it to you guys and see how you feel about it, was they said, if I caught it to be exact, the website is creativeeducation.co.uk. So it says there is a growing school of thought that using a red pen or red ink to mark or correct students' work is damaging to their self-esteem, as it is an angry and confrontational color, traditionally associated with mistakes. That's the statement there.
Oh,
So wait.
man. Oh, anyway.
brother. So here what? So you want me to mark it in blue then?
Surprise, surprise. That's what they want you to mark in dark blue.
Right. So how do I differentiate between something that is correct and wrong then visually?
Boom. I'm glad you said that, I'm glad you said that because I was sitting here listening and I'm thinking the same thing. I remember when I was a child and given, the teacher would take your book in, maybe you just took it home or whatever, and you come back and you look over, like, through my childhood and growing up through school, like red pen, yes, that may have lent towards, maybe I need to address this section or a spelling mistake, or if you think about Microsoft Word, when you type in something wrong, it comes up red underneath, or you need to amend your spelling and stuff like that. But it does have a negative connotation, but on on the flip side of that, I didn't take it as like a knock on my work. It was just areas that maybe I needed to improve in.
But so the red pen, whether you got it right or wrong, the red pen was to signify the teacher who was an authority and he was marking your works. Even your correct answers were with a red tick. Yeah, so I was saying, so how can, what these psychologists or researchers, if they're actually fully qualified psychologists or researchers, what made them think that the red only signifies a negative outcome?
It's not just that though. Come on, boys. Like we're like it's because society is soft. Like, let's be real. It's not just you can regardless of whatever research, anything like that. That's the same as banning sports days because it's deemed too competitive for kids that are overweight. Or kids that are not physically able to kind of perform in sports. Red pen. Well, we're here.
I like that.
Might as well. Let's go through it.
But red pen, like the connotation is in the eye of the viewer or the person like receiving whatever information. Red pen for me, it can be that's a sign, that's a checkpoint that you're receiving feedback of some sort, whether it be constructive, developmental. That doesn't always mean negative. Like red pen, and one, like Jay said, that's a mark of authority as well. Like if you're going through something, whether it be a script or work, or even if it's typed up, the standard font color is black, or in writing black or blue. So if you're trying to make a differentiation between someone's work and the authoritative work or the teacher's work, you just use a different color. But I've seen other colors before growing up. There's obviously green or anything like that, but it's just like a standard thing. So I'm not too fussed that, okay, if people don't want to use a red pen, that's fine. What's your solution? But I think the problem is that people don't like being told something about themselves that they might not be comfortable with. End of story. Well, it's not end of story because we've still got a whole podcast to go through, but...
Man done the dance.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Everyone go home, fam. I've said my piece.
Come back for season 2.
I've said my piece. Everyone go home, innit? Wow.
So that was one point. I have to say though, there's one point which was raised on that website that I hadn't thought of, and I thought, interesting. Maybe we should dig deeper on this. It also stated that people with learning difficulties and past traumas get affected more by seeing that color red.
Okay. So now we're talking, right?
How do you justify that? Because if I've got Erling's disease, which means I need an overlay on the work that I have. So if I'm working off a white piece of A4 piece of paper and I've got a pink overlay, someone with Erling's disease is going to see that better because it helps with their cognition. So can I not use that one though?
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. So by that theory, so from that theory, growing up in school, I should have requested never to have any white teachers whatsoever because of past trauma. Like,
unshot the rhythm, man. Like, where's forward rhythm?
Do any work off a whiteboard or any white paper in the
no white chalk, no white. What you say, Jay? No anything. Because if I see that, it's going to... Come on, man. Like, this is what I mean. That's how stupid it can get. However, I understand people do have traumatic... But we all, in my opinion, there's always an element of trauma in anyone's life. Brother,
quick question. Have you ever seen a child cry or start twitching and shaking because they see a red pen?
No, but there's... No. But
not necessarily because of the red pen. I've been in situations where...
But there may be kids that have received trauma because of certain things. But when you brush that across the whole from a societal point of view, that's where there's a problem. But let's not obviously.
Let's take the blanket approach.
Let's be real. Obviously, there will be certain triggers that people have individually of certain things. So there might be a smell, might be a certain food, or even a sound or a song that triggers someone to a traumatic experience.
But we're talking about a red pen though. So
So
okay, if that's the case, so what if children have trauma against a black pen?
But that's what I'm saying. Or
a blue pen?
That's my point.
They're throwing a blanket because red is deemed as negative.
No.
Yeah.
But you said
the
research.
We're getting into the semantics of it now. Like
you said the research though was that there's been evidence that children have shown trauma by a red pen, or a red pen has triggered certain previous trauma. Equally, there are children who might be triggered by black pens and blue pens and green pens. So then, if we want to keep children safe, let's not write period then.
Start using abacus again and that.
You see how stupid that argument gets? You see how stupid that gets?
So
If
I
we're
like
going to
this.
include everyone, so no one can ever be traumatized by seeing a certain color of a pen, let's not write period then.
Well, that's the point. That's what I mean. Like that's why a lot of there's a period like the last few years or the last decade, I guess, where there was a big thing of not having competitive sports days because people will feel bad, or there'll be certain children feel bad because or they don't do like first place. Everyone's a winner basically, and I've never agreed.
I hate that. I hate that.
I was-
I hate
I've
that.
never agreed with that theory
Nah,
at all.
I was gonna touch
my
on that.
son smashed sports day. Yeah, I'm not about this like not winning, not being competitive. Like, try your
You're not
best.
allowed
Yes.
to lose.
But exactly
You're allowed
that.
to
You have to learn
exactly that. You
because
have to
that's
learn
the
to lose in life.
that's the real world.
I'm fat, fam, and I still took part in sports days. I've done fat sports,
Bro,
javelin,
you were big in the
shot
game.
put,
Chocolate
discus.
boy.
You get me?
I say
guy.
fat sport.
Oh, I literally big in the
You in the
game.
field of it.
Nah, brother, people think my man can't move, bro. My man can move.
I'll
I
say
played
my
rugby.
man moves still.
I've done
I'll
sports
say
that
my
was
man.
suited to my
Them levers,
fatness.
boy. Them levers.
So I'm glad that we're passionate about this because when I saw that as a first point, I was like, hell no. It triggered me. The same way it's triggered you guys, it triggered me. Proper. So that was the first point. The second point for me, there was also another research done by, she was a student at the time, but she's now a psychologist, Carol Work. She was at Stanford University. And what she was touching on was, her topic was how praise became a consolation prize. And she was looking at how this was then getting kids in the mindset of false growth mindset, she calls it, where if a student gets something wrong, that student is praised regardless whether they got it wrong or right.
That is ridiculous, T. How does that translate into
Wait,
society?
wait. Let me finish. They're praised for effort. Right? There are many other things, but those were the two sticking points that really stuck with me. And I thought, wow, I know we were conditioned, but they've taken it another notch because I'm looking at it now, like you all have said. How does that transition in the reality of the world that we live in?
Because that's almost like we don't live in a capitalist society then.
No. I'll tell you what that's doing. So based on the whole topic, that's encouraging, and this is a very kind of sensitive subject, but that is encouraging and enhancing likelihoods of poor mental health.
But isn't that communism?
Oh, man. Boys.
Everyone's
sorry,
the
but it
same.
is
Everyone
like-
can earn the same and be the same. Isn't that communism?
Maybe.
Do you know what?
But this is what I'm saying.
That
Like
makes
you
so
can't.
weak and fragile, man.
But you can't. This is what the problem is. Like, okay, we want to go down that societal route where, okay, if something's, you get praise either way. Okay, you go into a working environment, an adult environment, where if you don't do the work that you're supposed to do, you're going to get negative or constructive feedback. Now, you've had a whole lifetime or a whole kind of chunk of your life where you've been conditioned that even if you do something wrong, it's okay. Now, you transition that into the adult world, the working world, and it's not okay, where you have disciplinary hearings for underperformance. What does that do to your mental health? What does that do to your psyche? Or even if it doesn't go as far as it's disciplinary, or your manager or your line manager or whoever it is just says, listen, this isn't right, this needs to be improved, immediately that's going to stir up a whole lot of emotions that now the employee has to kind of deal with because of the previous education or kind of influence or whatever you want to call it has put into this person. So it has a knock-on effect, and then you've got the whole kind of drama with employees and stuff like that. Like I said, don't get me wrong, mental health is a real thing, and that's a big thing. But can you not just see, like, if we're conditioning people to be like that, but that doesn't reflect the real world, unless there's a significant change. There's just a conflict. There's an immediate conflict. You've got someone coming out of the schooling system, getting into the working world, and it's a completely different world. Why are we conditioning people for what is not going to be real?
So
What does that do?
It's because they want to
Nah,
breed
could
mediocrity.
I just interrupt?
Go through.
I don't know whether to be disappointed or be happy right now. Because, so I had my questions lined up, right? And I'm like, yep, I know what's going on, question to question. And you boys just blown it out of the park, man.
Sorry.
No need to apologize. This
Sir.
is good. This is actually good because it shows where we are. It shows our mindset. Because the same questions I was having when I was looking at that, the same questions every single one of you are bringing to the table. So levels, man. Let's continue on that. Go on, Jay. I just had to say that because I felt proud in a way.
Now, I think that sort of process and conditioning is only going to breed mediocrity in society. And looking at, for example, gonna keep going back to this because I've seen both sides, the Caribbean model of schooling. If you don't pass your exams at the end of the year, rude boy, you're getting kept back. You're gonna be the oldest man in the next class, fam.
gunshot.
Exactly.
It's not no, okay, you're gonna have the top level, mid level, and lower level, and he's still going through school. Everybody, no, if you don't pass, you ain't coming through. So in the Caribbean, that's forcing you. You don't want to be the a year, 2 years older than everybody else in your class because everyone's gonna look at you like you're a dunce, fam. So you're gonna work hard.
All right. So where's the scope for like having extracurricular help in that model?
There is in the Caribbean. If you're not picking up, you have tutors after school. You have tutors on the weekend to help you pass. If you have, for instance, learning difficulties or disabilities in the Caribbean, they're not so advanced, but they still take into consideration to a point. Do you know what I'm saying? If you're dyslexic or whatever, you might get more times in your exams like they do in the UK, etc.
Which is fair enough.
Which is fair enough. But if you can't pass, you can't come through.
But that's Caribbean, and boy, if that, I'd love that to be how it is over here. But this is what happens. This is just a snippet of what happens. Some parent gets told that a child ain't doing well. Don't talk about my Jamie. Don't talk about my. It's this immediate defense.
I'm sorry. Where does character come from?
That's Karen.
No. We're not doing that. But that's the point. Like we get so defensive of we get so pent up about receiving actual helpful feedback. Like your son's struggling here. We think we need to do a little bit more reading at home. People take that as like, oh, you're telling me how to raise my, like, no, we're telling you how your son can pass school. And this is the difference. And this isn't just about children. This is about people in general. Yes, I'm going off on a tangent now. Episode 10 or whatever. People don't like the truth. Facts.
And the thing is, like, to actually speak on top of that, yeah, my childhood experience, yeah, 100% my parents were on the side of the school. Now, whatever I done wrong, my parents would back that up. They would never argue and clash the school. They would clash me, if anything.
Yep.
And say, I've got to fix up.
Yep.
And say, next time I come back to here for a parents' meeting, I don't want to hear X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
Say, you got to now be grounded for X, Y, and Z, and you're doing nothing but work. Yeah?
Why was that? Why was that? Why did they do that? Why did they take the side
my
of the
parents
school?
weren't having me being a negative outcome, and they wanted to do whatever they could to make sure that I wouldn't be a number, be a stat of all these podcasts that we were talking on. Every single one of these, in terms of negative outcomes, my parents had a gist of what that was. They might not have known the exact ins and outs of the whole systematic stuff, but they knew that I was more privy as a black man to being a negative outcome. Mm-hmm. So therefore, maybe they were a little bit more harsher when it comes to being critical and being you got to learn this and that, but there was also an element of praise too. Like there was balance, and I think this is what it comes down to. There's got to be balance. So when I done well, I got praised. I got rewarded. When I didn't do well, I got punished. It's that simple. Now, I don't like being punished. So guess what then, Kay? You know what you got to do. Don't do anything to cause me to punish you then.
There you go. Basic psychology.
That's what happens when you are taught that there's consequences in this world. Now, from what we're talking about, it's like we are almost bringing our children up as if there is no consequences. And then guess what? You step out into the real world and you think everything's all airy-fairy and all fluffy, and boom, it's rock hard and it's hard. It's a hard road.
Thank you.
So now this is what steps into the whole mental health side. Wait a minute, I had my whole 18 years that everything was nice and fluffy and all this stuff, and now I can't cope. So what happens when you can't cope? You give up. You fail. You lose your resilience, man. And to survive in this world, everything we spoke on in this podcast as black people anyway, you need to be resilient. You need to be able to survive in the worst of conditions.
I have to share my story on that as well. So obviously I came here when I was a bit older. So I went to boarding school in Zimbabwe, and my dad, 'cause there, corporal punishment was a thing. Teachers would beat you down, no problem. And my dad, I remember like parents' evenings, my dad would turn up and he would be like, listen, I don't have a problem with you disciplining my child. If my child does wrong, beat him down. And he will never come to me and tell me because he knows he will get the same. Now, other people may be like, oh my God, it shouldn't have been happening, it's abuse. That's what taught me, man.
And
that's what made
people
me
in the
who I am.
UKT complain about what you just said. It wasn't that long ago when it was actually acceptable in the UK.
Yeah,
my parents tell me their stories how they got beat in the UK.
I know that.
So
but
there you go.
I just have to say it again. This is why maybe we are sitting around this table, because we've had that similar approach from a young age. From our parents saying, listen, this is right, this is wrong, and you know the difference. When you don't know the difference, where are you headed then? Where's your life going? You've got no sense of direction. And also, the reason why people were told the right and the wrong is to push you. So today, I had 60% in an exam. Red pen, mark, cross, mark, right. This is where you went wrong. Guess what? My aim now next month is to get higher than that. If I get 80, right, I'm getting it right. So it's to push you. But if all you get is praise, whether you get it right or wrong, and then you're never told where you went wrong. Well, you are told where you went wrong, but not in a red way. So they can't use red. What's going to push you? How are you going to get better in life?
You know what? Yeah, that just ties into what M said earlier. You know, when he said about the schooling system is almost raising people to be employees. Because just imagine this. Let's keep this whole concept in play. If we accept this, no matter what you do, you get praise. No matter what you do, we don't push you to get better and get further. Then what it means is that if you got a mediocre or low score, then we're just going to say, you know what, that's just where you are. You know what, that's just what it is. But well done, though. So then that encourages you not to be a leader. That encourages you to constantly be a follower and be comfortable with your lot. While the other half are not comfortable with their lot, and they are still constantly looking for ways to progress. Now that creates a class.
Which brings me...
a class system.
Well done on that, Kate, because it brings me right onto the next question. Private and state education. Is it the same or is it different? Because when I looked at the difference between state schools and independent schools was only 6%. 6% of kids go to private schools.
And can you tell me the percent of people that go from private schools into governance?
Wait. That's what I was about to say. Right. So out of those 6% that goes to private, obviously they will then feed into the likes of Cambridge, the likes of Oxford, right? And then as they get older, right, you've got, bear with me, the percentages is 65% of kids who were privately tutored go into senior judges, right? That was 2018. This is research from 2018. 59% of those went into civil services. 57% of those are in the House of Lords.
T, it's almost like you're just trying to roll me up, fam. Like
These are so these stats I got them from let me just check this website. I'll put it in the description, so the website will be up there. But yeah, those are the stats. So you're looking at 6% of kids going to private schools, and then those private schools feed in to the likes of Cambridge, Oxford, all the top universities.
So let's then talk about conditioning to fail. Let's talk about that then, shall we? So what I'm hearing, let's talk about conditioning and to fail and the definition that I gave originally. So public school, one of the main differences is that it is funded by local authority or the state government. Yep. Private schools are predominantly funded by student tuition or private organizations. That already creates a segregation. Yep. So those who are financially not stable or financially well off or affluent enough to pay for a yearly fee over many years have a 60% less chance of becoming the people who rule this country. A judge is a ruler. How so? That he or she determines your liberty. He or she determines how you're going to be dealt with. MPs, they sit in office and they decide on policies and procedures that are going to push this country forward. So by money alone, money, not by quality, not by ability, by money alone, you're already 60 or 65, but I'll say roughly 60% less likely to be in a ruling position in this country. So you are conditioned by financial outcomes. Now we have to ask the question, who is more likely to be financially better off in this country? Who is more likely to be financially worse off in this country? And now we really get into social conditioning.
You know, it's funny you say that, yeah, because doing the research for this question, I came across a buzzword quite a few times, and the buzzword was urban. And I was like, okay, so difference between public and private. There tends to be larger classrooms in urban schools. There's more children in urban schools. Another difference is, like we spoke on earlier, the admission process in private schools is very selective. You can only get in if your parents meet a certain threshold, or if you come from a certain family, or you live in a certain area. A small percentage of kids from lower class incomes will get, if they're lucky, get a scholarship to enter a private school. But the term was urban. Coming from an urban area, a small percentage will get scholarships. One thing I found really, really interesting is, first I found it in America, but then I've done more research and I found it to be the same in the UK. The teachers in private schools don't necessarily need a formal teaching certificate to teach children in a private school. So think about that. In the government funded school, you need a certificate. So you have to go through the system. You have to be that worker, that employee to teach kids in a government school. But in a private sector, in a private school, in an independent school, your teachers are not bound by law to have a teaching certificate. So from that on, you could see the difference of class,
Wow.
different of exposure. Because someone in a private school could be an expert in their field, so they could be an expert scientist, and they could come teach the children. So they would automatically be giving the kids more knowledge and more education on that subject that someone who went to school and has to follow a certain curriculum could only give the kids so much information, could only share so much of their life experience with these children. So I think just by that alone you could see. And also another major difference is the choice, not only of the curriculum, but extracurricular activities. In private schools, they have more advanced classes. If a kid is smart, he can be accelerated. They have other options for them to choose. If they don't like certain academic lessons and they're stronger in others, they can go to others, and there's no mandatory subjects you have to choose, which I thought was really interesting.
Jumping on the back of that, I came across a website called the Public School Review, and it was a study to basically see the headline of the website is actually public schools and private schools. There's not much real difference. However, the website does highlight, and Jay's already touched on a few things actually about the differences of what a private school can offer. So Jay did mention about extracurricular activities, smaller class sizes, also more academic opportunities. It also talks about dedicated teachers and staff, more parental involvement, improved safety, better access to resources. However, the overview of this, and I will add this to the description, this website, it's a study. The study was in America, but I'm sure we can kind of get some parallels. The overview of it, and I have my own views on private and public. I think there's pros and cons both sides, trust me. But the overview of this study, like to kind of cut it short, was actually, it's not necessarily the education within those schools. It's more about the family income. It says the results of this study show that while private school students may be outperforming public school students, the difference is eliminated completely when you control the family income and parents' level of education and achievement. So that there's more to it than just what school you go to. There's other variables that can ultimately shape your destiny or shape your future. But I'll add the link in there because it's quite descriptive. But I know we've got our thing to do. But my own personal view on that question, T, is like I said, there's pros and cons. But I think one thing for me is just the element of, once again, going back to that real world situation. I think when you're isolated, and especially if it's like a public school, and if there's anyone listening who went to public school or private school, and has a difference of opinion, then let us know your experience. But I always viewed it as, especially if it's like a same-sex school and whatnot, like you're not really getting you're not getting a true reflection on the real world. Like once you get into work, whether you're working for yourself or you're working for other people, it's not just going to be the same sex. On top of that, it's not going to be the same level of backgrounds. So one of the biggest things for me, I think many years ago, there was like, with my oldest son, there was like discussion, not from my side, obviously, about him going to a private school. And I was really against it because I was more stubborn but I thought, well, I was able to go to a public school and I done all right. My friends, my people, they done all right. And I feel from a diversity point of view and from just a social point of view, I think you'll get more good and bad, but you'll get a better kind of grounding to life if you're in the public environment. However, I'm not going to discredit what public schools can offer, and it can accelerate people's learning, people's education. I get that. So yeah, that's my view on it, and I do think there's differences. And yeah, I'll add the link into the research of this lady who actually thinks there isn't actually much difference when you kind of break it down. But yeah, it's an interesting subject, interesting point.
Okay.
But I like Em said, actually, to be fair, I was in a situation, and my father was in a situation. So I'll tell you about my father's situation before that, to whereby he was asked to send one of his children to private school. And it comes back under what Kay was saying about the financial situation. But whereas my father was of the thought, if I can't send all, I won't send none. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's different to what Em was saying, to where we did all right in public school because we did. Do you know what I mean? But then in the flip side of that as well, my brothers and sisters, we didn't go to private school, and we all came out all right. So I think it is down to the individual. There's a lot of caveats to it, like I said. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, cool. So for me, I hear your point, Ems, but I'm with Kay on this. When we were talking about, you're now 60% less likely to get those roles because the private sector has taken it, the private schools. And that's where we need to focus on. Now, if I look at the website I was talking about, by the way, is revisedsociology.com. And there's a paragraph on there that I really want to quote. So he says 1 in 16 pupils attends an independent school, and yet 1 in every 7 teachers work at an independent school, meaning that as a nation, we spend twice as much on the 6 to 7% of privately educated pupils as we do on pupils attending state schools. It backs up on what Jay was saying. The classes are smaller, and then they get more teachers as well. Overall, they get a better footing to life. Yes, I understand like the pros and cons, like you said, where the backgrounds, there isn't a lot of diversity there. If it's a same-sex school, then you're not getting the real feel of what life will be after school. But in terms of opportunities, I myself will be more inclined to send my child to a private school.
What happens if that disassociates them from who they are? Because we're talking about, because first of all, a school shouldn't be chosen just because of the financial outcome that they can eventually get or type of job they can eventually get. Yeah. Schooling isn't just about getting the best paid job. That's not the only purpose of school. Socialization is a major aspect. Okay. That is for some. Maybe they go to private schools. So socialization is also a secondary part. You have to be able to move within the world that you live in. And if you are mollycoddled, and if you're wrapped in a bubble, and you feel life works a certain way, which usually comes with people from certain classes, both greater and smaller, or less and worse, then are you really setting your own child up to be able to navigate themselves in the real world? Or are you setting them up to be in segregation? I must stay around those that have the same ability or concept as me. So I will never transition out of my comfort zone. Then you haven't created a progressive child then. You've created a restricted child.
How do you mean? Just go back to what you said about it usually comes from certain classes. Could you elaborate on that? Mollycoddled. Because right. I think all classes, from what my own opinion, there's a lot of mollycoddling, whatever it's called, throughout the whole class system.
Throughout the whole class system. So how
100%.
do the underclass get wrapped in a bubble?
Because once again, depending on your upbringing, and if you're going to portray that same upbringing to your child, they're going to feel like, well, I don't need to work hard or whatever. I don't need to do this. Like that's mollycoddling. That's like, I don't think the class has no kind of say when it comes to actually how we bring our children up. Well, it does, but what I'm trying to say is that I think there's a lot of, that's why, like, if you look at it, you always hear people, people are always like, from a British point of view, people always taking our jobs, whatever, and they all this certain people are coming over here stealing our jobs, but as jobs that we can do as British people, but we've been conditioned to think that's beneath us, and that isn't like the high class people that think like that.
That's not the underclass. That's working class you're talking about there.
But working class, but even like I said, what is define underclass?
Well, the underclass are those that are marginalized on the edge of society, are almost missed by society and expected to survive on their own.
I think you can filter some of the working class in that as well.
But
it's not just about money. Like, that's not just about. I think it's more.
You have class systems for a reason, and it's very hard to transition between one class to the next. Believe it or not, it's much easier to move down in class than it is to move up.
100. Statistically, they say it takes 2 generations.
I think there's just like mollycoddling, whatever it's called, like in every class. I don't think there's a particular class that has it more.
So, like for example,
has it more.
For example, I'll put this to you guys, for people that are on the benefit system, and I think we've all come across generations of families, from the grandmother, the mother, to the kid being on the benefit system. Right?
Mm.
Would you class those people as the lower class or the underclass?
They are between lower and underclass, yeah.
So, but they tend to be some of the people that, like M said, will say, "Oh, they're taking our jobs. I can't get work because of them," but yet they're more than comfortable on being on benefits.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Like, just the mentality is, I think there's that type of mentality goes through the whole class system. That's quite general. I think that's quite general.
I think that's quite general as well.
Yeah, that's quite
benefits
general.
don't exist in working class and middle class and upper class, and
that's what I'm saying. In the underclass, I'm talking about the underclass.
Benefits exist for working class as well.
Yeah, of course. A universal credit and all them things there all counts.
Oh, okay. So what benefits can you get when you work full time?
Childcare.
That's childcare, but everyone gets that. So
yeah, but it's still an impact on your financial situation, though.
But we're talking about class. That's available to everyone.
But depending on what, even if you're working full time.
Well, depending on your class, depends what benefits you can.
Yeah, but if you're earning a certain or minimum amount of money, then you're still entitled to some benefits, even if you're working full time.
Full time hours. Full time hours. So it doesn't equal.
You man work full time. Try and get universal credit.
Well, that's
guarantee you won't get it.
Different.
We wouldn't apply.
But I guarantee you won't get it.
Well, it will go on the. You'd be means tested though, wouldn't you?
Yes, you have to earn.
Like M said,
under
you'd have to earn a certain amount. Yeah, earn under a certain amount, and then your universal credit will be adjusted to suit that. If it makes sense.
If you earn more than 16K, you won't get it.
But there are other things out there. There's other schemes.
So, boys, let me bring it in. Let me bring it in quick. So the reason why I was bringing that up was, and the reason why I said I back what Kay was saying. For me, and we've been saying this throughout the podcast from first episode, we want our kids to do better than us. So my view on this is, if I can give my child the best opportunity to do better, then I will. Because guess what? The 6% that goes to these private schools, they're the same 6% that will be sitting on the judges' benches in the civil services. They're the politicians. And guess what? They're the ones that are passing the laws that are coming back to bite us. Because guess what? Private schools do not have to go with the national curriculum. They can do their own thing. They're not governed by that. But they will be the ones that will pass the regulations that will be enforced by the national curriculum.
See, I agree with that, because then that creates a massive disconnect. When you get to those levels of lawmakers and whatnot, and they have no kind of reality on the other side, and
100.
Then there's obviously a lack of empathy or sympathy, like when people are going through certain things because of their backgrounds and environments, etc. I get that. I agree on that side. I just think that there's a potential to lose something that you gain when you're in a more open environment rather than that closed circuit environment, which is private schools. But that's just my opinion. But like you said, I I totally agree. Like we all want our kids to have a better chance and better education, but
I guess at what cost, isn't it?
At what cost? Exactly that. So using your analogy, then, would you be comfortable? Would it make you more comfortable knowing that the leader of, or more of the leaders of this country, were the people that that were on the breadline, or even knew how much a pint of milk was in the shop, or knew how much the slice of bread is? Those kind of people that are more in touch should be making the decisions that rule us all.
I think that goes across anything. I think in any environment, even in a work environment, you get on better with people that maybe have an understanding.
But those that are making decisions for us, the rules in which we are governed by, don't really have an understanding of the masses, in my opinion.
Probably, but
which creates the disconnect that you mentioned.
Yeah,
I would say more than probably, because if we look at our prime ministers, only one of them, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, didn't go to Eton, the private school Eton. Most of them went to Eton.
Okay. But this is where I have to branch off, not just individually, but this is where I have my own internal conflicts, because I don't look at people like that. I don't vote for these people. Standard. Maybe that's giving out my political affiliation, while it's not. There's no political affiliation, because I don't believe in that system. So I don't really look. So I understand, like, those top 6%, they get into these positions, whatever. Touch wood, I don't want to be involved in anything which puts me, apart from my skin color, that puts me in involvement with those type of people, the lawmakers, whatever. I'm sure I'm always one step away from. But my point is that these people that we're trying to, it's a hard one, because, like, you talk about prime ministers and that, but I don't believe in those people to be part of my life. So I look at it from maybe a sheltered point of view, like for my kids, because I think they're bigger. There's bigger things going on than people of those echelons of society, really and truly. But that comes into, like, my spiritual and religious beliefs, I guess. But
okay,
it's a hard one.
So because where I'm coming from is this: already where I am, my child has already got the other half of inclusion in everything, of family, the whole. She's already exposed, right? She's not in a bubble. Going to a private school is not going to change her. It might drop a few percentage, probably 5 or 10%, but she's not going to be fully in the bubble, because she's got a bunch of family members that will expose her to all these other aspects of life. But what it does, it then gives her the best of both worlds. And guess what? We're talking about change. We're talking about getting into certain positions to be able to make these changes. And that's, for me, the only way we can do that, that's in my humble opinion, for me, the only way we can do that is, whether we like this or not, is to also have some of our people in those positions who will understand where we're coming from, where there's no disconnect. Because at the moment, there's a disconnect.
100.
Period.
But I just think that for short term, yes, that you do need to maybe have people in those positions, but long term, surely it is just changing what the norm is. Long term, we shouldn't be thinking, right, we've got to kind of be in these same environments as them, so we get in those same positions. Like we should be flipping the narrative, or actually, no, we can do it here. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, and then it comes down to, like, so school is only school, and I've had many arguments over the years with mothers of children and whatnot, in terms of, like, where someone will say to me, "Oh, the school says they're doing fine. I'm not gonna." That's not enough for me. Schools, there's a curriculum. Teachers get paid to say good, bad, whatever. There's more than to schooling, or how to apply yourself in school, than just what a piece of paper says. So that's when the parenting and the upbringing, I'm not just talking about parenting from a mum or dad, like in terms of family, like extended family, that's when that comes into it, where you install those other little bits that you will not get from school to get you through school. Like, if I didn't have certain things installed in me, I wouldn't have got through school. Yes, I had the knowledge and the know-how and the I guess some of the academic side to as a baseline, but for me, in terms of being one step away from, and for and my people, whatever, like you have to have these other things. Like you have to have these other things. And I think me being in the environment and growing up in the environment and being in the public school that we were got me through school. I don't like it enabled me to kind of be more expressive and just maybe do things that I maybe wouldn't have been able to do or be exposed to, or even be around the boys that I was with. That got me through school. But if I'm now kind of segregated, and it's different depending on where you are geographically, I'll get that. But that would have chipped a little bit away from me. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have got through school, but I'm just saying the person that I am and the person that I kind of want to be, like grounded and kind of just wise to the world, if that makes sense. That's why I'm kind of always in conflict and thinking, well, why don't we kind of create that norm where we are, rather than having to think that we have to go to these places to get in these positions? Because surely we're trying to entertain their tables where we want to create our own tables. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're bang on. You are bang on. That's a
I hear you.
hypothetical situation, though. Like, bearing in mind, if you went to that private school, then we're talking in hindsight here. So, like, you've gone through your schooling life with all these extra, variables that you've had from outside of school, which prepared you to go through school life. If you went and did that through private school, like, you wouldn't know what you missed, because you wouldn't have missed it. If that makes sense.
And also, if I jump on the back of that, it's not, I hear and I agree. What I mean by we need to send our kids there, sometimes we need to also learn what the other side is doing. I'm not saying they can join their table. We need to build our table, but we need to know what's going on the other side. Because for me, yes, the extended family can teach, but we also have limited education.
I think we know. I think we know what goes on the other side. Like,
not to an extent. I would want.
But if they come out of that schooling system and they're better prepared than someone who's coming out from a public school system to deal with the roles of the world, then we know that what they're doing over there, be it yes they pay for that privilege, but what they're doing over there must be better than what's happening over here.
Sorry, what are you guys meaning when you're saying better prepared? Because, like, for me.
Yeah, cool.
I understand.
I'll elaborate on that. I will elaborate.
I understand that obviously people need, like, if that's the norm, people need to earn a living, people need to provide for themselves. But better prepared for me, baseline, is, can you look after yourself on your own? Can you cook? Can you clean? Can you kind of can you control yourself or have the right mannerisms to kind of present yourself? Can you walk the street and not have to look behind your back? Can you do all these basic things? Do you have common sense? If I was to leave you on your own for a few weeks or for a week or whatever, like now you're like teenage years, whatever, are you going to conduct yourself in a certain way? Like, can you speak to people? Like these are the basic skills. Yeah. Everything else for me, and maybe that's to my detriment, but everything else is an add-on.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And where the clarity needed, from my opinion, on what being better prepared, is I'm talking solely just the schooling system and what that offers a child. Going through those 11 years from reception through to you finish your compulsory education in 16 or 18, whichever the law is now. That's what I mean when I'm referring to that. All the other things that you've mentioned about just all them basic skills there, I think they're tuned. They are, like I say, the seed is planted at home. At school,
that's what I'm saying.
At school and in the working environment, let's take school as we're talking about. So in that school environment, I think that's when you flourished. You flourished them skills. You kind of tune in or hone in on those skills of how to talk to somebody, how to approach an adult with a question. Where do you go for your support? Where do you go if you have a concern? Those kind of things. Just the basic things that you will take into the working world. But the actual curriculum itself and the difference between a public and a private sector schooling systems, I think the private offers you a better. More of an advantage because of what they teach you.
100 to an extent.
I think someone's already mentioned the smaller classes and the more one-to-one teaching that you're going to get in a smaller class, because you can get a smaller class in a public school. Let's not be twisted. But the opportunity of having that one-to-one, or maybe 5 people in a class and one teacher, that teacher can you know what I mean, hone in on all 5 of them
I
students
hear.
easier than having a class of 35,
I
32.
I hear all you guys, and I'm not trying to kind of be the one that's arguing. I'm just
No,
saying.
I don't take it as an argument. This is a discussion, Jed, and
But
you're making valid
we're
points.
talking. We're on a platform where we're talking about being one step away as people of color, as black men or mixed race men, or people that know people of color or from that or are connected in some way.
Mhm.
I can categorically say, if it wasn't for our parents, whether it be mum and dad or just mum or dad or both, whatever it is, we wouldn't have got through the schooling system like we did. So that tells me that there's more to just being in a certain school than just being in a certain school. Like, what I'm trying to say is that we needed to kind of maybe be in certain environments more so than others, because we already had an insight, well, or maybe our parents or whatever had an insight to what the world can bring to us. So it's actually more important. So when I go to parents, even like my mum saying, okay, so the first thing she says, I better not hear anything bad, and I do the same thing to my son. Teacher better not tell me anything bad, like, because we know that we just got to get through this part, but we know that the world might not kind of be straightforward like it is if, I don't know, and I'm just being generic here, if Sally goes through school or Martin go through school, blah blah blah, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between, and the difference is, it doesn't, like, for me, to an certain extent, and if there's listeners that disagree, it, when you've got the color of skin or the pigments that we have, it's not as straightforward as, oh, there's a smaller class, so you're going to get more attention. We've spent 10 episodes talking about all these different things that are happening, to now kind of say, well, this is the deciding factor. No, I don't think so.
No, not
I
at
don't
all.
think we're
I think
coming
there's a lot of
through with it.
drivers behind that. There's a lot of drivers behind us getting through the scoring system how we have, on whether that's been, or it has been a positive experience, and what we've had behind us. I think what you were saying there, there's a lot of drivers that will propel us through, and maybe give us that extra push and that extra bit of backbone to, say things with our chest, what I mean, shoulders back and head up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say that what's called I don't want to get the message to get misconstrued in terms of uh this being the mitigating factor to everything that we've discussed. There are multiple factors, complex ones too, that school will never mitigate. Because school is only one aspect of our life. Let's be real here. Education is only one aspect. There's many
Yeah,
other
100.
aspects. Yeah. However, I guess the argument is can this make the journey easier? Now, what we do know is that you are able to get a higher chance of having a better financial, and in terms of job wise, a higher paid job, or a more esteemed job within society if you go to private schools. What we also know is that you don't experience the same problems as public schools. This is another reason why people send their kids to private schools if they can. Yeah, and if they have the spare money to actually send their kids to private schools, because you don't get certain issues, or actually, sorry, I'll say this again, you are less likely to get similar issues than public schools have. Just by cutting down the class size alone increases your child's chance to learn and to flourish. Yeah, just by that alone, the fact that you're paying your child there, you're paying your child to go there, or you're being privately funded by an organization, just by that alone will cause less problems. Do you honestly think that there are the same degree of fights or issues, if we just go by our experience of our school, do you think that's being replicated in private schools?
No, but drug use would be.
Drug use would be, yes, but certain drugs.
Yeah, probably higher end drugs as well.
Well, this is what I mean.
Just as an assumption there.
Of course. But the point is this. There's reason why people choose to send their kids to private schools. There's a reason why certain kids are picked from private schools to have scholarships, or have go to certain universities or colleges, or enter certain work fields. Yeah, there's a reason why this happens, or enter governance. Yeah. So yes, I understand the point of no, we don't want to play their game. 100%. We don't want to play their game because their game clearly doesn't work for us. It's their game. And the answer is we got to make our own game.
That was my point. Like,
yeah. So I'm just kind of summarizing that all up because I know how our minds go and we go back and forth, and necessarily the viewers might not necessarily get the exact conundrum of what we're trying to say here. This system doesn't work for us. So we have to tailor it so it can work for us. Whether that's going to private or public, it doesn't matter. We need to have an additional learning, which needs to come from the parents who have gone through society.
Yep. That's the difference. That's
So
the difference.
I hear that and I agree with it. But where my issue was, if we look at private schools, I just want to hammer in what Kay was saying. When you're paying for a child to go to private school, you've got a lot of say on what happens there. They're also parents' community, or I can't remember what they call it, like a board, parents' board, right? Where you sit there, you go through everything that's happening at that school. So you're more involved, hands-on. Remember, private schools are not following the national curriculum.
100%.
Right? That's another thing. Whereas if you're going to a public school, you're told what's going to be taught to your child. End of. Hence, private schools can choose to not use. I'm sure I was speaking to my cousin. His son goes to a private school, and he turned around and said they're still using red pens. They don't care, right? They are showing them the right and wrong, and they will say this is what's happening. There's no, praise for everything. These are some of the things that private schools can do without anyone on their backs to say you can't do that. So for me, if I'm looking at my child and I'm thinking, yes, I can give you more outside of school, but I also know my knowledge is limited because of the education I had. If I can give you somewhere where you can get a bit more than I know and still install the other values that the kids you're going with there to the private school don't have, you've got the best of both worlds in my eyes.
What if, this doesn't have to be anyone's child in particular, but what if you had a child and you sent that child to a private school, knowing your background, knowing all this knowledge that we've expounded upon these 10 episodes, and then your child starts to see you and your family, because you don't come from that private school background, you don't come from that middle to upper class background, they start to be alienated by the school system that they are going to. Because you are taught to move and navigate your way in the world in a different way. You see yourself as better than public school kids because you're a private school kid. So now we need to go into the dynamics of that private school. And if you send if one of us five here send one of our children there, are you worried that your child will become alienated so much so that they will prefer to be around those that are from a private school background in terms of their culture, the way they are, etc., and start to almost want to forget about their other side, which isn't acceptable or isn't, praised within a private school in our environment? Are you not worried about that aspect of it?
No.
Me personally, yes and no. I'd like to say that I'd like to think that with my children, I impart a lot of things around culture, about self-awareness, about identity, that they can carry that in whatever environment that they go into and take the best from that and take the best from any environment that they're in. That's in theory. That is in theory, as of my children are young. So they're going to be like more malleable to certain situations, but I'd like to think that they would carry themselves how I would want them to in these certain environments.
Okay, so I hear that. Let's talk about social conditioning though. So you will believe that your parental skills and influence will be able to overcome the social conditioning that's being pushed in private schools? when kids spend how long in schools and kids spend how long at home with their parents?
One of the main things that I push to my children is to question everything.
And also,
Absolutely everything.
and also remember, I know what's going on at that school. I've got to say, because I'm paying. So my eye is on that school and everything they're doing. That's one. Two, I'll give you a real example. My daughter, we had this conversation, Kay, and I'm sure Ems we touched on when we came around yours. And I said, she's in herself, she's in a shell, right? She's not used to being around a lot of people. And I make it a point that whenever I get the opportunity where there's a lot of people, my family, my friends, I'll bring her, right? Throw her in the deep end. Go on. Get out of your skin. Get out of that shell and socialize. I'm doing that because I see, okay, you're reserved. So if you're in private school, the same thing will be happening. I'll be throwing you in the deep end, right? You've been at school Monday to Friday. Guess what? The weekend, we're going to your cousins. There's going to be 10 or 12 of us there. Right? You come back at home 3:30. Guess what? You're not at private school now. You're here. We're doing what's here. So I'm in control in both situations. I might not be 100% in control at the school, but I know what's happening there. And I've got to say. Whereas, in my opinion, with everything that's happening, sorry, Jay, with everything that's happening now and how things are changing, like in terms of the national curriculum and what they're bringing in, I'm not in control. I don't know. Tell me I'm wrong.
I was looking at it similar to K, but in a different aspect. Not that the child would reject the parental culture or upbringing, but what if that parental culture and upbringing actually becomes a detriment and the child suffers trauma because of it being in an environment where no one understands it? So,
or bullying.
Yeah, so which would lead to bullying, them being chastised, which then what goes on at the school in terms of curriculum-wise education would have no effect on the child. And I only say that because I actually have a friend who is of mixed race heritage, and he went to a private school and he was the only black boy there. And that actually, he got chastised and racially abused so bad to the point that when he was not at school, he was in the inner cities of London joining a gang to be around black people. And he suffered trauma. Because of that trauma and the bullying he got, he went to find his strength in a negative way around black people.
That right there, fam.
So would a child suffer more trauma being in a private school setting, and I'm talking about a black child, because they're the minority, whereas in a public school, quote unquote urban, where there's more of a mixture of different, not only black, whites, Asians, whatever, where they're more likely to suffer trauma or find it harder, regardless of them having a higher percentage of being in a job, having a better job or being in a better position because of their race. That's just a question that I thought listening to the conversation so far.
That's big, man, and that's very insightful, to be fair, and also sad that your friend had to find strength. I understand it, don't get me wrong, but had to go down that route because of the trauma. That's a mad one. But I think, really and truly, why can't we, we keep talking about schools and stuff like that, but why can't we make, and obviously we don't have full control because a lot of public schools are just mixed full of different people and backgrounds and whatnot, but just focus on yours. And whether it's in private, I've listened to what everyone said, and I've taken on board on what everyone said, and to be fair, you've all got valid points. There's no I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I think just the right way to go is, listen, just educate your children on top of whatever school they go to. And when I say educate, I'm not talking about the academic side. Just educate your children, and I'm sure people understand where I'm coming from. Educate your children, and if we raise our children in the right way and steer them away from the right things or the wrong things, and just put limits on certain things, like I've spoken in the last podcast about just the fact there's technology. I'm a bit worried as a parent about how much technology they're exposed to, and just how certain media is just warping the minds, and I have to take action to make sure that my children don't go down a certain way. If more people have that mindset, then these public schools could convert just by the way of how people think. They could just convert into private schools in terms of the mindsets of children. Let's just increase the capacity of how children think, or their capacities to think across all spectrums of subjects. That should just be like the basics for me. Like I said, so no matter what school my children went to or go to or went to or whatever, hopefully the installation that is critical. I always say this, like from the first 5 years before they even enter a school, that first 5 years is critical to. And it's not like you have to sit down and go through loads of ABCs and 1, 2, 3s with them every day. So the time they hit school, they're like really advanced. That's not about that. It's just about kind of making sure that as a human, they can handle themselves in different environments and whatnot. So T, what you said you're doing with your young one, that's exactly what we're talking about, like installing those things. So when they get to that moment where we let them out, where we're not seeing them for the majority of the day, they're ready. And all other things come into play once they hit to school, but it doesn't. But hopefully, and it should get to a point when there'll always be certain influences with children, but it should get to a point where there's enough installation for the words of your parents just to always be lingering in your mind. So even if your child's trying to maybe going down a certain route or whatever, or even thinking a certain way in a classroom, whatever, that installation of our just upbringing or bringing them up should just be lingering in the back. So even if they know they've done something wrong, that's just lingering in the back. I know I've done something wrong, and I know my parents won't approve. Similarly, I know I've done something right, and I know my parents will be really happy about this because I've done something right. So that's what we need to do more as a society. But we're talking about obviously our people and our children and whatnot. We need to just make sure that those critical years before we release them out into the world, that we do enough to make them be their own people, where they can make decisions for themselves. Because we don't just get jobs based on our education. I haven't just got jobs purely based on what I put on my CV.
100%.
Yeah. You know what I mean? There's more to it. That's about how I've communicated my knowledge or communicated my passion for wanting a job, X, Y, and Z, or just a personality.
Also life experiences.
Or life experiences. So there's more to it. So, but there can be someone who has all the grades in the universe, but if they can't articulate that, if they can't communicate well, if they don't have the right manners, whatever it is, then they might not get it. So there's, like I said, that for me, sometimes I feel like as a society, we are backwards in terms of we try to push the education thing, and we forget about the human side. The education is just like the factual numbers, letters. That's that side, the process side. But there's more to it than that.
And the sad thing is, I'm just going off that as well. This argument is only for those who don't have power. Yeah. This is the problem. All this what we're talking about is an argument for people who don't really have power. This conversation is what I want my kid to know how to cook, to clean, do you really think the people who are in power give a 2S if their children know how to cook and clean and that? You're taking over my company when I'm dead. And I own 17% of the income of the UK. So whether you know how to cook or clean, in fact, you don't even have to get a driving license because someone's driving you, Dread. So I think the perspective is that it's that whole analogy, isn't it, of the have and have-nots. It's the whole analogy of the 1% ruling over the 99. So it's that whole situation there. And once again, I'm bringing this back for the one step away from boys here and also the listeners too. We've got to create our own game, man. We've got to create our own game. So this doesn't even become a conversation. The conversation that we have is, so boys, so what are we going to teach our school this year? This is what we need to be doing. And that's the greater end. That's the greater end. I think over the whole 10 episodes, and this being the final one for season 1, I think there is no doubt to say, no doubt. And please, if you do have doubts, more than willing to hear what you have to say. Please contact us. Please socialize with us. Please converse with us. We are very talkative people and we always want to learn. But I think there's been no doubt in terms of what we have presented that we need to step away from this so-called society that does not want us to succeed, does not want us to progress, does not want us to survive. And in doing so, we create our own.
Couldn't have said it better from both of you. It's like you said, Kay, these conversations we're having because we don't have that power. And I agree, we need to step away and do our own thing. I'm always saying about we need to build our own table. Because statistically, they say to move a class up, it takes minimum 2 generations. So I think in hindsight, that's what I've always got in my mind. So always looking for ways to make that happen and happen soon. Because the powers that be, the people that, like you said, who has got the 17% of the nation's wealth, they've got generational wealth behind them. We don't. We're starting from zero. They're not.
Exactly.
But when we keep talking like that, we're giving them more power. Like when we keep talking about percentage and class, and they don't, like, we need to reclaim that power. And it's not like hate speech or revolution or anything like that. It's the fact that I find power. I find power in communicating or even having conversations with you guys. There's power in that. There's power in talking to your child and seeing your child kind of learn from a mistake, or even see your child do a certain behavior, which is a right behavior, based on your influence. There's power in that. We need to, once again, because no one's perfect, we need to, we know systematically where the power is, but that's because there's a system that is controlling that. We need to take our minds, yes, we have to live in it for now, but we need to take our minds out of that systematic way of thinking, where it seems actually that don't mean nothing, because that's how I live. Like I said earlier about these people in positions of power, that doesn't mean anything to me. So they can knock on my door, or they can put envelopes for my door or whatever, to try and get my vote for them to rule a system that I don't agree with. But where's the power? Like if no one, I'm not saying no one to vote or anything like that, everyone do their own thing, but if no one responds to these people that we know over years and years, decades, centuries are not trustworthy, honest, moral, humane people, if I don't give you that power, which my vote can be if it's culminated across a large group of people like with similar mindset, then there's no power there.
Well, I think the issue is there's power in today's society reflects ownership. And when you don't have ownership, you don't have power. So regardless of, like you say, we might not take part in this system, but we don't own our own system. So until we can own our own system, we're going to be forever powerless within their system.
Do you think these people own you, Jay? If these people that we talk about,
to an extent, yeah. To an extent, yes.
In what way?
They by policies, procedures, laws they put in place, opportunities that are how people perceive me is partly down to them. So there's a lot of things. They don't own me like to this point of slavery where they can tell me what I can and can't do, but to some extent they can. But to some extent they can. I can't. This is what I'm saying. Thinking about it now, because really and truly, I have to get a job if I want to be able to provide for
I was
myself
about to
and my
say
family.
that could be another podcast about
But I'm
modern
talking,
day slavery.
but I'm talking about you as a like the
Yeah,
essence,
you,
the
me,
essence of
me, the
you.
essence of
Do
me, the
they
essence of me
do
is
they
gonna go.
own the essence of you, or even the intellectual property of you,
Nah,
or your
they
uniqueness, or your personality? All of that. Do they own that? And can
nah,
they
they
own
don't
that?
own it. They can't.
They can own
They
it.
can't. Well, no. Well, if I
I was
sell it,
about to
if I
say
sell
they
it to
can.
them, if I sell it to them, they can. But I would not be able to profit from it. Really, it's gonna be a harder road if they're not involved.
If you sell it to them, you can. So who has the power then? If you was able to sell it, so it's up. If you was to sell it, that's your power to kind of sell it to
It's my
someone.
power to sell it, but I'm saying because we have to rely on their system. Without them, there's no value in it. Do
Can
you know
I
what I'm
just
saying?
remind you? We
I might
touched.
think it's priceless, but
I hear you.
they're gonna
We
put a
we
price on
we
it
we,
regardless.
we touched on this, I'm sure, on one of the previous episodes about the guy who was a bank manager. Do you remember?
Yep.
And they fabricated a story about how he was a drug dealer, a human trafficker, to a point where he lost his job. At one point, they rehired him, but lost his position. His life was living hell. He was in debt, I think, 200 something thousand pounds. So to me, that's a way of owning. They could fabricate anything for you. You could be in prison. How many stories have we heard in America, obviously mainly, but even here, how many stories have we heard of
The UK as well.
wrongful arrests and wrongful convictions?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are in jail 20, 30 years of their life for something they didn't do. So to me, that's owning me. Yes, my spirit will be broken in there. You can't turn around and tell me someone locks you up for 30 years, can't own you.
Or even 1 year, brother. Imagine you getting locked in a prison for 1 year for doing something you ain't done.
We've seen this countless times, and they can do that. I like this because we get to sit around the table and we get to discuss this. We may disagree on certain points, but the objective is the same. The goal is the same. We want to build our nation.
100%.
So viewers and listeners out there may think, oh God, what's going on there? We're going to have heated conversations next season. Don't worry about it. It's coming. But in a good way, because we're learning. We're helping each other grow. And us agreeing with each other's point all the time is natural. It's never going to happen. What's the point then? We might as well just do what we're doing quietly. But we're here because we want to grow together.
And that's a big point there, T. 5 black men can talk and have a disagreement without stabbing each other. Believe it or not.
Wow. Buzz.
That's another podcast, but hey, let's have it.
Just saying. 5 black men can have a disagreement with each other and not stab each other.
100%.
We can sit at a table and say, okay, what's your point? Okay, cool. Let's learn from that. Let's build. We don't have to be an enemy because we have a disagreement. And that's a message to our nation, to our people. You don't have to be an enemy because you have a disagreement. But as you said, that's for another podcast.
That's deep, man. Anyway, to rein it back in, I've got another question, boys. So we touched on the education, and then that's filtered down to employment, and then the 6%. But another point that we haven't touched on is the social services side of things. How, I know, Kay, you asked that question before, but we're bringing it back now. Right now is the right time. How do we feel about that? Because me as a parent, I'm not going to lie, that's one thing I'm nervous of. My little one, she's still little, but I'm nervous of how much control I can have in her life without outside interference.
I think the first thing I want to say is like, I don't want to jump on the stigma that social service is bad. I want to say that social service workers, whether children's social service or adult social services, I want to say your job is difficult as hell and commendable. You go into the field because you want to look after welfare. You might not necessarily know how that might look once you've qualified, but you get into that field because you want to safeguard adults, and if you work in the children's services, children. And I think that's what we have to start with. We have to start with the fact that social services have a statutory, remember, this is a statutory responsibility to protect and promote the welfare of children. Yeah, that's just a clear fact. And that's, I believe that's defined in the Children and Social Work Act 2017.
100%.
So let's just keep that clear. Yeah, it's about safeguarding and protection and the promotion of welfare. However, and I say however not to smudge over what I've just said. As I said, social workers out there, you're commendable, and the jobs that you do is difficult as hell, and the pressure that you receive in terms of caseloads and all that is ridiculous, and you're expected to look after each family. That's mad. And there are parents out there who are completely undeserving of their children. Undeserving. Yeah.
I agree.
So in terms of now,
That is another podcast.
That is another podcast. It is another podcast.
Season 2, boy.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Maybe season 3. Maybe season 3.
Or 6. But yeah. But on the flip, in regards to this question, in terms of the power struggle between you being a parent, in regards to the governmental initiative which social workers have to ensure their safeguarding and protection and the development of a child as well. They're also involved in the development side too. Now, there can be a clash. And I think most of the clash, if we talk about us being black men, can come from a cultural aspect and can come from an aspect of stereotyping. This is what we've discussed in previous podcasts. I'll use one example. For example, when M said previously, when me and him were walking, we had our do-rags on, and these children were with their mother, and they walked past us and said, "Oh, look, mum, gangsters." Yeah. And I said the analogy, what if that child grows up to be a police officer? Well, now the analogy is this. What if that child grows up to be a social worker? And now he's dealing with a black father with his children. There's an innate cognitive, not renaissance, but ability or deep-seated ability of where that black person is associated with a gangster. Now, what connotation do gangsters come with? All sorts of negative outcomes. So immediately from the get-go, because of a innate cognitive dissonance, which is the real term that I'm going through or going for, you can then have a harder time dealing with social workers or social care than any other people or any other nation. So that can be a power struggle there. Why? Because you must conform. You must conform to what is deemed as a protective parent. And that might be down to just the way you speak, the way you deal with discipline. I know T said earlier, we spoke about beats. I know Jay said earlier, Indo-Caribbean, how you can get disciplined. Now, that's almost cultural. However, culturally, that's not accepted here. So you smacking your child, to you, you're disciplining your child. To the social worker, you're abusing your child. So that becomes a clash. Because now you then feel that you have to be, well, you're technically not the parent. If you now feel that that child, and this is, I guess, might be another podcast too, but the child learns that they have more power than the parent. Because the law is on their side.
Which should never,
there's levels
never
to
be
that.
the case. And biblically, that should never be the case. Just saying.
Fun fact before you carry on.
Okay, no problem.
I once said to my mum, I'm going to call, what's the child line?
Who is it?
Yeah, I bet she got a number for you, innit? She got a number for you.
No, she got the number for me, yes. And she had me the phone. She said, go ahead. You want to go live with the foster parents where people abuse you? Men are trying.
Who hasn't broke that line?
But,
Yeah.
She waited till Trinidad to beat me. She's like, okay, I can't beat you. Don't want to get licks in England.
Wow, the fact you waited that long is peak.
It worked. That's what
And remembered as well, but yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be careful. There might be a statutory limit on this, you know.
Yeah, I'm saying, yeah. Boy, she might get drawn for after all these years. Wow.
I'm in my
Wow.
30s now, all right?
Well, there is no statutory limits, boy. Them limits
That's
are
what I was
endless, man. You
saying.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
serious case reviews are for.
Yes,
Jumping
my
on the
man.
back of what Kay said about the whole social work industry, like it's a hard world to be in. Like he said, it's not something you're going in there for monetary gain. You are in there to safeguard the life of children or child or an adult. Just as important as NHS, the doctors and nurses and all the other services, in my opinion. Obviously, things have happened to change laws and statutory laws in that field to a point where I believe that the parenting that I received as a child, I'm not saying that I can't parent my child like that, but if I was to take elements from that in today's society, you're going to be frowned upon. There's you know what I mean, it's almost like you're always one call away. I know we're one step away from, but it's almost like you're one call away from being pulled apart, from not being able to be in the household, to having to live somewhere else whilst X, Y, and Z is going on, all over little, small, innocent things that within your household is perfectly fine. Within another 70% of the population's household, that's everything's fine. But you have that little niche in the back whereby if that stone's not unturned or overturned, are you missing something? And then that's the conundrum, that's the grey area. I suppose that's where social services do come in. It's a needed service, but there is a fine line these days between being able to parent your child how you see fit and being able to parent your child how the system seems fit. And they don't go hand in hand, in my opinion. They don't go hand in hand. But that's notwithstanding of the job that needs to happen as well.
And of course, just to be a little bit more clarity as well, we're not talking about the extreme levels of social care where it's a crisis moment where the children literally has to be removed from the home immediately, etc. That's to do that's very extreme levels where the child's life is literally at risk.
Yeah, 100%.
So we're talking about more of an aspect of how much say do you have over the upbringing of your child and the influence that society, this is about social conditioning, I am getting. So will a parent be socially conditioned not to chastise their child in a certain manner, in a certain way that doesn't cause significant harm?
Environment.
Yeah, in a certain environment, which then shows the child what? Oh, mom can't say this. Oh, mom can't do this. Or dad can't do that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, if I tell such and such, then my parents got to fix up. In fact, I could lie.
Power's a dangerous thing
now.
sometimes.
I could lie now. I could make up that my parents did something. If they don't buy me X, Y, and Z, I'm going to tell my teacher they hit me. Now, imagine if that's the society that you're bringing up. Imagine if that's the power that you're giving. Now, I'm all for children being open and honest with professionals if there's some serious issues going on. But there's again, coming back down to balance. We cannot have a society where the parents are disregarded completely when it comes down to what goes on in their home. Because then there is no private home anymore, then is there? That's exactly what social workers do. They will come in and overturn your home for the right reasons. Because they need to know what is really going on within that household. But if the outcome is the parent can now no longer have a power, because we're talking about power, a parent has the guardianship over a child legally. Now imagine if someone tells you how to be that guardian.
That's a mad analogy, you know. You bring another child into this world. You have the power and guardianship over them. But then someone has the power over you to take that away.
What does that make you then?
A pawn in the system.
No, it makes you a child. Because really, here's the analogy. You are the guardian over a child. Someone tells you how to be a guardian. So that makes you a child too. You have to do and live as I say. Same as what you would tell a child. So where does a child learn what an adult is and what a parent is? if society governs what goes on. Now, this is, of course, I'm not talking about, I have to clarify for people who might misconstrue this. This is not about extreme circumstances. For extreme or even any harmful circumstance towards a child, I'm all for there should be an investigation what's going on there. And of course, social service also like to work with the family too. There's a stereotype. There's a stereotype with social workers. That you've come to take my child. You come to take. Yep. That's not their job. Their job is to work with the parents and upskill the parents if they have to, in order to benefit the safeguarding of the child.
That's paramount. That's something that needs to be remembered.
Yeah,
the upskilling of parenting, because there's no God-given right that you're going to be an excellent parent. You're going to make mistakes along the way. That needs to be made paramount. I think
100%.
100%.
And it's not about
where children are having children. I think it's needed as well.
Yes, 100%. There you go. But it's when it gets to disempowerment of parents. That's when it becomes a problem. It could also create anxiety for parents. You might be thinking, "Oh, I can't do because what if?"
That anxiety, I think, is already there. That anxiety is already there.
That's what I'm saying. But that's what I mean. So going back to what I said, like your society needs to start in your home. Like as long as it's not in the danger or endangering children, or you're going against any type of safeguarding. But if it's within the parameters when you know actually you've got the skill to raise your child to be a decent, upstanding human, like that, the mindset should be okay. This is our society in the house, because we can't go outside and think everyone's going to be the same. It's your responsibility to raise it. From the moment you have a child, you like Kay said, you're legally responsible for the upbringing, and obviously you have that empowerment and guardianship over them. So don't see that as what I'm trying to say is, as a parent and as a learning parent, which I am, don't see that as like see that as like an opportunity. See that as a blessing. You know, I have a responsibility to raise young people to become adults. I see that as a blessing. You know what I mean? So if you got that mindset and you go, okay, well, hold on a minute. In order to get my child from A to B, which is youth to adulthood, they're going to need some type of structure. They're going to need some type of installation, not only just from me, but from the people that I expose to them as well. So your society should start in your home, within the realms of morality, I guess. That's the best way to say it.
And I think, Em, as well.
And if you do that,
yeah,
sorry,
I just want to reflect on what you said earlier, just to bring it forward. I guess what's your opinion on this? You said earlier about someone cannot take this power away from you and such, or you don't vote, which I don't vote either. I don't take part in that game. That game hasn't benefited us, period. But the social services is governed by governance. They can have a direct impact on your power, on your home. So we may not vote, but it doesn't matter whether we vote or not. There's an aspect of society that will have an influence and impact on you, regardless whether you vote or not.
Yep. Hence, that's one of the million reasons why I don't feel I need to. But yeah, I agree.
And that's one thing. Oh, sorry, I'm gone.
So yes, I live in the real world, and I've had real world experiences. Obviously, I have children. I understand that can be taken, like that power. Obviously, they're governed by governance and whatnot. But when I talk about power, like it's not about like laws and stuff like that. Like I said, like even if you was to strip everything down, even if someone knocked on my door, banged my door down and locked me up and whatnot, yes, it's going to break certain parts of you, but just having that mindset and that strength of that power that, you know what, you're not going to take the essence. Like, so you can do all this, that and whatnot, but even if I hold on to 1% of who I am and what I represent and who my people are and all of that, then that's power in itself. If that 1%, if I'm completely wiped out, then yeah, fair enough, I'll say it. But I haven't been in these situations, but I'm trying to say is that you can, even if you used to take all these people away from me, whatever, you're not going to take what you really want to take from me. And this has been the case, I guess, over centuries, is that we still keep going. We're still here. Think about all the persecution, everything that we've had, but we're still here. The people that wanted to wipe us out, but we're still here. What does that tell you? That tells you that we are powerful. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like the laws and all that, yes, I understand, like living in the real world, but I'm trying to say like something, we wouldn't be here if we didn't, if our ancestors weren't powerful and strong, like in their mind, not about physical and like how much labor they can do, but if our ancestors weren't strong, we wouldn't be talking on this podcast right now.
Survivability.
So if they can do all of that,
Adaptability.
then this should be a breeze to me, really. And that's the mindset that I'm trying to build myself into. I'm not saying I'm like right up there and I've got everything set. Absolutely not. But if we're trying to be those conscious role models, we've got to lead the way and open the door and go, you know what? The power is still here. The power is still there, but it's just about, okay, how do we maneuver that power whilst it's still kind of raw? Because it is raw, because we don't have so it's kind of like Marvel when you got Infinity Stones and like you have to have certain things to control them. Like you got a power gauntlet. Like if any mere man handles an Infinity Stone, that power, they're gonna get bust.
They're gonna get bun.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, sorry guys. I know I'm going off on one today, but it's just
No. Look,
Brother,
important.
This is the platform to do it.
Yeah, but it's important for us to kind of we're talking about all this stuff, yeah, and we have to talk about it. I get it, but
Yeah.
we over the last 10, we've spoken about a lot of things that we had an awareness about, and we need to kind of make more people aware that we're aware of it, and that we're aware that people are aware of it too. But we have to put it into perspective that we're still talking about the same system. All this stuff we're talking about is in that same system. And yes, we have to live in that system, but doesn't mean our minds have to be in it.
100%. So the reason why I brought that question up was a family friend of mine. He was on that list of vulnerable in terms of the pandemic. He's got children, and when the schools opened, he said to the school he wasn't going to be sending his kids there because obviously of his vulnerable state. And the school wrote to him to say that wouldn't be acceptable unless the kids themselves were vulnerable. They still had to attend. Now, he would get fined, and then social services would get involved, everything else. That to me, when I heard that, I was just like, wow. You can't even make a decision to protect your own.
So, social services wasn't going to get involved because of what reason?
No, so the school threatened.
The school threatened to get social services involved.
Yeah, they said, first of all, you pay a fine because the schools, as you know,
So because of truancy, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of schools will do that. Especially with the pandemic. That's yeah.
Then, boy, so that's a whole other thing now. That's a whole other thing, because you're being told two messages. One message is that to stay at home. Oh boy, this is another podcast already. One message is stay at home. Don't go to work if you don't have to. Social distancing in terms of no bigger groups than 6, yet you've got classes of 30 and they're sitting kids side by side.
Yep, definitely another podcast.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. Calm.
I'm just saying, because that's pandemic part 3, man. So.
Do you know? But this is why I like this last episode, because we've touched on most previous episodes that we've done. But naturally, for me, when I heard that, naturally as well, yeah. When I heard that, that's why it made me pose this question, and I thought, what? So you're telling me I've got a vulnerability. I'm saying my child can't go because it will expose me. In the same sentence, you're telling me if you don't send your child to school, you'll be getting fined, and then after that, we'll get social service involved, and then things go left from there.
Hold on, wait a minute. I thought black people were 6 times more likely to get COVID.
Well,
4 times.
I was just going to say this. It goes back to the
Shouldn't
COVID.
black people be excluded from schools then?
Well, we mentioned this in terms of what would happen if if also we've been told that black people are more likely to get COVID, and we have a lot of people working in certain sectors where they're more exposed. Knowing that you're more vulnerable, apparently, why don't you not go into work? That's that kind of decision. So you've been given this information to say, you know what, you're in danger, but go to work, please. Like, it just doesn't, like, none of it makes sense because it's nonsensical. And going back to what you said, T, like, it's different. Like, even if you want to take, like, your children, like, if your children at school, you want to take them on holiday. If you take them outside of school time, you're going to get fined. All right. But this is slightly different, and we have to kind of pick our battles. Like, you don't always have to kind of be against all the time. But what I'm trying to say is, like, even last year, obviously before the pandemic, like, I knew that I was obviously taking my child on holiday, but I knew the consequences. I'm going to get a fine. So there's certain times when you think, okay, so I think sometimes they'll use things like that, use tools like, oh, here's a fine, or you do that. Just that's a scare tactic, isn't it? To have that power to prevent you from taking your child away. And there's obviously good reasons why they don't want to. But if you're comfortable with your child's learning education, and obviously they haven't been absent, for me, the power is, well, I want my child to come on holiday, so I will take that fine. So the power gets flipped. Yes, you can't do that in every circumstance, and you can't. And the one that you mentioned is a lot different. But that's what I'm trying to say is, all these little things are being put in place to test your character. As to test us, not just black men, but as to test your character. Okay, are you compliant? Are you going to be compliant if we put this thing out? If you put that thing out? And half the time, they won't even tell you. It's like, who was it who in the group, like, sent something about where the government made a new law? I think it was about blood. And was it even publicized?
Yeah, that was me.
But there was
that's horrible, man.
You know what I mean? Like, that's another podcast. But the power was, okay, someone had information that could have been critical to a lot of people. So the power in that, and I'm digressing, so I'm going to cut it short. But the power was, you pass the information on for us to make a decision, whereas the government were expecting us to be none the wiser and be in a state of kind of just normality where they can get away with certain things. And that's always been the case. How much can we get away with?
And I think that leads into social conditioning once again, if we go back to the first point as well. Because we live in a society where we just go with whatever the government says. That's social conditioning. We talked about the whole COVID stuff. We talked about, and the situation Em was talking about was, if you don't opt out of being a donor for organs, when you die, you can be legally harvested for organs. Now, there's people out there who don't mind that, and you know what? More power to you. You don't have to do anything then. But if you are against that, I suggest you go and opt out of having your organs harvested once you die. Now, that's a personal opinion everyone gets to make. And the problem is, Em saying that wasn't publicized well. In regards to, I had to pass that out to all my peers. And most of my peers and family opted out because that's not what they want for their own body. So, but the social conditioning is, we can do what we want, when we want, and we can say what we want, when we want, and people will adhere.
Even when you're dead, you still have power over you.
There you go. There you go.
It's a dictatorship disguised as a democracy, and I've been saying that for years. They feel they have more power over you and yours than you do over you and yours. So to the fact that the school could tell a man that shows that the school thinks they have more power over your child than you. And the fact that they threatened him with social services, they think that the government has more power over your child or his child than him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying? So it's just a dictatorship disguised as a democracy, really. From the fact schools can do stuff like sex education and teach your child about alternative sexual methods.
Oh, yeah.
And you really have nothing. You have no say about it. Shows you how they think.
I wanted to touch on that, but I thought that's another podcast still.
It is another podcast, so I'll just mention it. That's why I said alternative.
Little teasers, man.
I'll just mention it. But it just shows you where they stand and how much power they think they have over you and yours.
But when it's all said and done, we're going back to T's, Jay, that is what I'm talking about in terms of just it being disguised. But with that situation with T's from T's side and like the whole COVID situation, if you was to kind of keep going down the rabbit hole, let's say that person opposed, no, I'm not taking my kids into school. What is going to realistically happen? Like, what's going to be the end game of that situation? Are their children going to be taken away?
No,
From the parent?
I would like to think not, because obviously they'll do their investigations and it will get tossed anyway. But it's just I guess it's the hassle that comes with it.
Yes, and hassle, trust me, and I've got a lot of experience. Hassle is a massive...
Worse.
a massive thing where, and it's also hassle's used as a tactic as well, just to put people off. It's too much hassle, it's too much hassle. Like I've seen it, I've heard it all along the line. Even when it comes to like children and mediation and stuff, all the hassle, like all courts and child family courts, all that stuff, is to deter people. Normally, that's another podcast. But normally, dads, yeah, that's definitely another podcast. But yeah, anyway. I'm done, man.
I see where you're going with that, and I wanted to touch on that as my final question. But I know it's another podcast, but I just wanted to dip my toe a little bit in it and then bring it back. Obviously, us guys on here, black men, strong-willed, got everything going, and we know now. Following on the question about social services, it then filters down also to the dynamics of our relationships in terms of our baby mothers, if we're together or not, how that affects our children and how it affects how much say we have in their upbringing. Is it too much?
Okay, so let me go quick as I haven't got any pick me them. So I'm coming looking at it from the outside and in terms of being conditioned for failure. I think as black men we deal with stigmas and preconceived notions of us. So I think we feel it more than anyone. So typically, if our partner is especially not of the same race, there's going to be some sort of disconnect in that sense. So trying to teach a child who might be of mixed parent heritage of how to deal and how to identify these things in societies would have an impact, in my opinion, as a man with no children yet, looking from the outside in.
Sorry, T, can you just repeat the question again before I go off on one?
So I'm saying one of the things also that impacts us the most is if, as Kay said earlier about as black men, how we're viewed in society and in the eyes of some social service workers, like Kay said, what they do is hard, it's challenging, but they follow a guideline. They're just doing their job. And that guideline normally paints us a bad image. Now, adding the fact that you might not be with the mother of your child and you might not have a say in how the upbringing goes on the child. How do we feel about that?
Okay. It's not good. I will always say this. I said this to anyone that I know. I say it to anyone in my current circle, even in a relationship that I have. I make no secret that in an ideal world, to have the strongest kind of connection with children and also a family relationship is for everyone to be one, like to have one household, one unit. That was always my vision. growing up before having children. I'm not in that situation, and you learn to adapt. But for me, from the moment that you make a decision to leave a relationship that has children, for me anyway, I said to myself, these are the things that are going to be taken away. So I'm going to get onto the power thing, because I was very strong on talking about power and not losing power. You have to accept that there's certain things that you won't be able to have as much as an influence or control over, because you're just not there, whatever. But the difference is that you have to have the mindset, if you're in the situation where you've got a child with someone else, you have to have the mindset that you're still, once again, mindset that you're still as equally as important in that child's life. Because there's two ways you can go. You can just like completely, okay, I'm not in the home, so I'll just fade away into the background, because that's unfortunately, that's a choice that some men make, but also that's what some men are pushed into. But that's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, we've said that so much today. My point is that there's been times in my life where people have tried to think that they have power by saying certain things, so they'll use, as an example, children will be used as weapons. We all know that happens, that goes on all the time. You can't see the kids, or you're not having the kids, or you can have this, that, and whatnot. I'm sure there's millions of people that are going through that all the time. And there's been times in my life where I've kind of been restricted to when I can see my kids or have my kids for whatever reason people see fit. There's been times where people have threatened or goaded me to say, take me to court, or they've said things like, but you won't win because you're black, verbatim. And all this stuff is done to try and make you feel, especially as a black man, to try and make you feel powerless. But the thing is that if you've got the mindset to say, you know what, they're my children, that you'll never, no matter what, even if you was to like take them to a whole new country, like you can't change their DNA, you can't change their name, you definitely can't change their name now. You can't take those things away. So even if you take my children like a million miles away, you're still going to see me. So where is the power there, really? Like, you can do all this stuff, but when you're going to all this effort to do X, Y, and Z, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, but this is important because a lot of people are affected by this. If you're doing all this stuff to try and get at the man, and you know you're actually hurting yourself and hurting your children, is that power or is that weakness? That's my point. So for my experiences in terms of like having to control over my children or anything like that, I'd like to say that like going back to what I said, those first 5 years for all of my children, I was there. Those first 5 years, 4 years, I was there. I was a constant, and I am a constant in their life. But the kind of installation, those little bits that you need, like those early formative years, I was there, and that makes such a difference. Now, for people that don't have the opportunity to be there, you can still install. It's just about being consistent. You can still like, no matter what people say, children just naturally by nature, they will know, or they will yearn for having a mum and a dad. That's just a natural kind of human, in my opinion anyway, human thing. So take the opportunity, or make the most of the fact that children yearn for those things. If you don't want to and you choose not to, like without any kind of outside reason why or mitigating reason why, then that's on you. But if you've got an opportunity where you've created a child, whether it's been planned or not, whatever, you can have an impact on that person, on that child's life, and you can have a say. Because I feel like the power for me is the fact that I was there, and I installed certain things where even the mothers can't take that away, where they'd have to kind of put their hands up and go, you know what, like there's only so far I can go, because the children are connected to them or connected to the dad like this. And yeah, that's my take on it.
That was a strong point there, man. Strong points, plural. I just wanted to focus on one aspect of something that stood out for me a little bit more than the rest of it. You said something around verbatim. You won't win in a family court setting because you're black.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of this podcast, we're talking about color.
But, hold on, just because I said the word verbatim, there were other things that was said actually in that statement, but out of ones to choose not to put in there or to choose that, I just found it funny that they put that one in there as well.
But it's just about the recognition. So for those out there who may come from different nations who might say racism doesn't exist, it seems to me that certain people in certain circumstances know when to acknowledge that racism does exist.
100%.
That's just interesting to on me. That's just an interesting point that I took from what you said there. You won't win because you're black. That's acknowledgement that racism does exist systematically.
But but like I said, like saying that is trying to enforce some type of hyped up power that they don't like I said, like that's what I mean. That's not like when like words, like even going back to other podcasts that you've mentioned about wordsmiths and the power of words. Like words can be powerful if you allow them to be.
I hear that to some degree. I hear that. I hear that.
So I agree with everything you said there, Hams.
You're trying to draw me out, T. You're drawing me out today, boy.
Well, there's been some gems being dropped already, man. There's been gems in this, man.
I'm in that mood, man. I'm in that mood today. For me, it's not just them using that as a weapon. It's also the system coming in and enforcing
100%.
that. That's where my issue is. And I know this is another podcast. We need to touch on this another time. But I'm just trying to add all the questions that we've had, all the discussions that we've had, or the points that we've raised, the gems that were thrown in there to solidify what we're saying about we are being conditioned to failure.
Sorry, this is going to be my last piece. I'm going to just give you an example just based on what you said. This is a real life example. Sure. I had to go through experience of or like in early stages of a mediation session, which costs money, just for whatever reason, mediation, like from a family child situation. I had to, within myself, I chose, because you can choose to be in the same room as the other person or not. And normally, I guess 9 times out of 10, people in the same room. I, within myself, chose not to be in, and it annoyed not only the mediator, but also the other person involved. It annoyed them because they thought I was being difficult, but I didn't want to be in the same situation because I know, in my mind, I knew how the system works. And as we know, if a black man starts speaking with passion or anything like that, that gets converted into aggression and whatnot. And I just didn't want to be in the same room where a pictures are getting painted all the time. But I wasn't going to allow, then this is what I talk about power. I wasn't going to allow that scenario to happen where tears start going, or that person seems like they're being the victim when actually people were just talking. Like I wasn't ever going to allow that to happen. And it got to a point where, because it probably doesn't happen too often, where the media had to keep going from one room to the other, she was getting a bit flustered because she thought, isn't it just easier to kind of just, but I was not going to allow that to happen because I know that how just the whole situation is going to be painted. And I made a start saying I'm not being in the same room because I know how this will look like. Like I'm like, put all the facts together, or put all the facts on the table, and there's not really an argument. But if you put two people in the room,
emotion into the mix rather than logic,
then the logic and facts get disregarded, and I wasn't going to allow that to happen. So I know, so that's that system. And you could just tell, you get vibes from like the mediator was a female as well. And like after this, on the second session, it's kind of like, okay, I see where your mind is going now. Your mind isn't going towards the facts, and that's your real, actually the proper information. Your mind's going to kind of your emotions and kind of how you think that how this is being played out. not happening. So sorry to interrupt, but I had to. That's a real life example where I had to make a stand and go, you know what, I'm not going to be sucked into this. And I'm not going into this platform like this. I'm not doing it. I'll be in the one room so you can hear my piece. Other person can be in the other room, because I know what it will. I know what will happen if it's just both people in the room, and I know I won't get a fair. I probably won't get a fair chance or shot anyway. But it's going to be even worse if it's two, because of the stigmas and the stereotypes that black fathers have. So that is a choice that I had to make, and I'm done.
You know what? Thank you for sharing that, man. It's not just, this is not the first time hearing about this. Countless. I've got family members, I've got friends, I've got people that have gone through similar situations. Be it the mothers going to CSA, which is child service allowances, I think, to get more money, to stopping the father seeing their kids, to making up lies about the father has done this and done that, and the courts, because once someone throws an allegation, they have to investigate, and they will not let you see your child until that investigation has gone on.
But there's no smoke without fire.
There's no smoke without fire, but guess what? This smoke
that's sarcasm, by the way.
will go on. Oh yeah, I know, I know how you operate. But guess what? That will take 2 years of your life without your kids, because an allegation has been thrown in by someone who's bitter about a situation. And we don't have a say. So in those 2 years, you're upset as a father, not because you don't want to, not because you've given up your power, but physically they've stopped you. That child is being subjected to anything and everything without your know-how, without your say. And I just want to point out something that you said as well. It's funny how whenever these cases happen, they always throw a female lawyer in there, or a female judge, or a female mediator in there.
Not always, but I see your point.
9 times out of 10. I've got proof to back this up. 9 times out of 10, all the stories I've heard, 9 times out of 10, there's always a female allocated to that. Not that it's an issue, but when you look at psychologically, it plays a massive part emotionally, because it's just like me. If you throw me in a situation where I'm dealing with you, my emotions will run towards you as my brother, because I'm seeing you and I'm thinking that could be me. So that runs in there. So you've got all the other points that we raised, and then you've got the fact that the system can turn around and say, right, you're not going to see your child for 2 years, by the way, because an allegation has been thrown in. Regardless whether you're guilty or not, even if they find you innocent, you still have to then go through mediation, contact centers, things that will cost you money, things that will cost you time, and all of that. Like, for example, contact centers, you only see your child probably an hour or two. That's not enough. You can't install anything within an hour or two.
It's not enough, but to anyone in that situation, I would always say still, even if it's an hour, like,
yeah, 100% still do it.
In that situation, but I know what you're saying, but that's more than not doing it, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100% do it. But all I'm saying, the picture I'm trying to paint is all of this is in my opinion, systemically is designed to have full control of our children and condition them to failure. The reason why they give us this job where we're working 24/7, we don't have more time with our kids, even if we're in the house.
Just a quick one to throw it in there. Could we possibly be talking about social control rather than social conditioning?
It's a bit of both, to be fair, because children
I was going to say the same.
Because you got a situation where I don't know, you might have a situation where a father actually can't see his child not because of his own doing, but because of that, because of whatever reason, the child's been conditioned to think that the father doesn't want to be involved. There's some fathers out there that don't want to be involved. Let's not pretend. And I know we're talking about like a parenting thing, but let's not pretend that there are people. There's a lot of people out there that don't want to be involved. Like I said, that's on you, because that will always come back to bite you in the bum. Like when you're old and grey, or whenever, it will come back to get you. But for the fathers that do want to, but there's a barrier and all mothers, vice versa, because this happens both ways, but historically it's one way more than the other. You're going to be conditioned, like the child is getting conditioned to not expect to see the parent, and being conditioned to think that the other parent doesn't want to be in the child's life, when that's not always the case. So there's conditioning, but the social control, it comes from the parent that is doing this kind of parental alienation. I think there's actually a term, or whatever it's called. So there's a bit of both. There's trying to control, okay, no, you're not leaving the house, or you're not allowed to pick him up. But there's also actually the child, which is the most important thing. And that's where they're being conditioned, and then they grow up and have all types of emotional situations or traumas or anxieties because they've been conditioned to feel a certain way. And it's not until like they're 30 or 20 or 25 or whatever their age is where they go, you know what, I'm going to speak to that parent that didn't want to know, whatever. And then they get the other side to the story. And then there's more trauma because it's like, how could you have done? Anyway, that's another podcast. Boy.
Bring it out, boy. Bring it out.
Yeah, bring it out in the other podcast. That boy, the material for that podcast. Wow. Wow.
Strong. Viewers and listeners, you've got to keep an eye out for this one, because it will be coming soon. Now, I've got a bad feeling season 2 will be fireworks.
I'll definitely host that one. Don't worry.
I might have to fight you for that one.
No,
should we
that's not what I want to do.
Should we co-host?
Be one step away from fighting,
You know what
boy.
I mean? They get just what they want. See, I told you they're violent.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, days.
So, I think we've, without a shadow of a doubt, looked at it, proved from all angles that our kids are being conditioned to failure. Or that's the plan anyway. It's up to us now. Because like M said, even though I was arguing with him backwards and forth, he had a valid point. We still have some power. We still have some say in what happens in our kids' lives. Whether it be, there are tools out there, whether your child has got a smartphone, you can limit the amount of time they're on it, you can limit the people that interact with them, you can do all sorts. You can have a family day where you say, right, switch off TVs, video games, everything. Just come down and sit with us. Have a conversation.
I need to do
Let's talk about family. I never used to understand it until when I became a father. My dad used to sit us down. It will be one day of a week where we'll sit down and he'll say, right, switch off TV, switch off everything. Let's talk. I want to tell you where you come from. Ask me questions about your grandma, your granddad, your uncles, and he will tell us our history. That's important.
That's big, man.
We need to do more of that because our kids are growing up there with no direction. They don't know where they're headed. And worse yet, they don't know where they're coming from. It's in us. So I don't know if boys have got anything else to say, but I just felt as the last episode, it was important for us to touch on this subject. And also open up the floor for the last one before we close.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to conclude it. Like if you think about how we started the season, And what we're trying to do, I think it's fitting, and I don't think this was planned either, to end this season more focusing on the next generation and the impacts and influences that we have on the children, because that's what we're building for, I guess, in more ways than one. It's not just about a financial thing, but we're trying to build so there's more comfortability, I guess, across all spectrums. So yeah, shout out to you, T, because I think it's a perfect episode to finish on.
Blessings.
Yeah. It's been a nice journey still. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank our viewers and listeners who have been with us through this journey, man. Like I said at the start, episode 10, final for season 1. When we decided to actually sit down and have these conversations, we just said, let's do it. We had been talking about it for a little while, but we felt it was important to have our voices out there, encourage each other, especially in the tough time that we've been through with the pandemic. This year has not been an easy year, but we're looking to grow from strength to strength. We're looking to engage with our audiences, with you, and also a massive part is interaction. We want to learn. That's the main thing. We're not sitting here saying we know it all, saying we have all the answers. No. Through this journey, I've learned a lot. And I'm sure I can speak for all my brothers here. We have learned a lot by just sitting down and doing a bit of research here and there, and also coming together at a table. We may not agree with everything, like I said before, but we're growing and we're teaching each other. So let's grow together. Let's get more people involved. Speak to your families, speak to us. And also, what's important as well, please give us a follow. Follow us on all social platforms. Find us on Anchor, Twitter, Soundcloud, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. We're all over there. And our tag is 1SAF. So that's the digit 1SAF. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you in season 2. Please be ready. And also, if you can, advise us on what topics you'd like us to touch on as well. Thank you for listening to us.